Hi, and welcome to Game Over Winnipeg. I am your, for now, host, Andrew Berkshire, usually from Game Over Montreal. But hey, the Jets, they're fun. I've covered them before for the Winnipeg Free Press, so I know a bit about them. But we've been relying on our local Winnipeg analysts in these playoffs because, you want to get our fans best serviced, right? We want to make sure that they have the best people that know their team the best, that have a stake in it to talk about the Jets. So we've got Harrison Lee today from Locked On Jets, Locked On Winnipeg Jets, by the way, who's going to join us in a moment. But first, before we get into it, the Jets obviously are now down 3-1 against the Colorado Avalanche. I'm in a different setup. My in-laws are visiting, so I'm just sitting on the couch in my living room, move my camera in here. But before we get too deep into what happened in this game, which of course was it wasn't a fun one for the Winnipeg Jets. It was a very rough game to watch, even from my perspective. Let's tell you about where you can find Game Over Winnipeg next season. Game Over Winnipeg is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for right now during the playoffs. However, in October, the network relaunches for real, and Game Over Winnipeg gets its own channel. So for all of your Winnipeg Jets content, fun, news, and analysis, head on over to the Game Over Winnipeg channel from the Game Over Network channel. Open it in a new tab right now, scroll past my ugly mug, all the way down, and click on the Winnipeg channel from our featured channels section. Click subscribe, and make sure you hit that reminder bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Jets fan friends and family to come check out our awesome community. We promise they won't regret it. And make sure on this video you smash that like button right into oblivion. All right, I'm here with Harrison Lee from Locked On Jets, Winnipeg Jets, not New York Jets, for those wondering. Obviously, Harrison, this was not the game that we wanted to see from the Winnipeg Jets. We wanted to see some pushback, and you could probably argue this was the worst game of the series. Hold on, Harrison. I can't hear you. Your mic's muted.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Uh,
go.
yeah, I think this has unfortunately followed a bit of a trend with the past four games where the Jets, at even strength, kind of got Colorado. One thing that I didn't realize coming into this series is for all the talk about Georgiev, he leads the league in wins with an 897, which kind of scared me because if the Avs offense was, firing on all four cylinders, and that was kind of getting masked by the fact that they had a goalie who couldn't make saves, well, what happens if he suddenly figures out how to make more than one save? And I think that's been a bit of a problem for this series. I think there are a lot of questions, some of which we're going to get through tonight. But yeah, I think for me, this game just sort of felt like the culmination of everything that's gone wrong in the series. And I was hoping for like a Hail Mary change, but unfortunately, we're kind of left with what looks like smoldering ashes.
Yeah, it wasn't good. And I know a lot of like watching the broadcast on Sportsnet, there was a lot of criticism of Connor Hellebuyck. And I do want to get into that because frankly, I don't think it's very fair. And there's a lot of talk about the Jets allowing a lot of goals, but they're not scoring much either. So I do want to talk about Connor Hellebuyck, but first I want to talk about another Connor, Kyle Connor. I have not been impressed after game one. I thought he had a really good game one. Today, I saw a lot of going around guys along the boards trying to take like easy routes. And when it's 3-1, 4-1 in a playoff game and you're getting pushed to the brink of elimination, I was shocked at how soft he played today.
What's really funny is like this is probably the most engaged we've seen from Kyle Connor. I know a lot of people look at his numbers, and oftentimes, whenever you talk about who's the most underrated Jet, it's always Kyle Connor. To the point where I actually think his reputation has well exceeded the kind of player that he is. He can be fun and he scores goals, but unfortunately, a lot of his game has been the type where he cheats for offense. He definitely looks for breaks through the neutral zone. He'll sometimes abandon his man markings, or if he does back check, he's not really aggressively marking somebody closely. And that kind of transitions the same way when you're going up the ice. In terms of forechecking, he's been more aggressive this series. I think today, there were quite a few issues with the first line, and Connor is just sort of a symptom. He's definitely not the guy who ever really drives the bus. And I think in his case, I wouldn't I don't know if I want to call him a passenger, but I think that's, he's generally been more of the complimentary guy. And because no one right now on that first line really seems to be driving much of anything except a nice golf cart, I think we're probably looking more at a bit of a non-functional first line. I think that's really tough. And Connor has kind of become, a symptom of some bigger, deeper problems with that unit.
Yeah, Trevor Mon, who was on with us last game with Mark Dumont, says first line extremely pedestrian yet again. And that's kind of the feeling that I've gotten so far from the Jets. Like, it's not just the first line, obviously. Monahan and Toffoli haven't been producing either. Um, Man, like the Jets in the third period, I'll give them that they pushed play in the right direction and had Colorado defending, but I'm just gonna update natural stat trick here. Yeah, okay. So heading into the third period, high danger chances were 16-4 in favor of the Avalanche, and after the third period, where the Jets owned the puck most of the time, they were 17-5. So it was still tied at high danger. So like there was a lot of puck control in that third period, but the Jets are having a really hard time getting to the middle of the ice. And it seems like they've got the guys to make that happen. Like Sean Monahan is a middle of the ice guy. I think you could say the same of Velarde. Connor at his best is in the middle of the ice shooting pucks. Even I think Mark Scheifele likes to get into the middle too, right? Like he's a single shot shooter, but he's also a pretty good playmaker. Sometimes he's more on the outside, but this team should be way better than this. Like, credit to the Colorado Avalanche, but the anemic offense seems to be a problem.
Yeah, and one thing that's really stuck out this series, I mean, obviously the foot speed's a huge problem. The Jets are just a slow team, and they've always been that way. They'd like to be slower, physical, more measured, more controlled. And I think that there's an assumption that against a team like Colorado, if you stand them up at the blue line, if you kind of limit the neutral zone transition, that's going to be enough. But I think the Avs have found very easy ways to get around that. And I think one of the big issues that's causing is like every time the Jets compete for a second chance puck or a rebound or something, they're just behind. I mean, they're behind on
Yep.
every single battle, whether it's on the forecheck, whether it's on the back check. I've never seen them lose this many battles for pucks, whether it's trying to force turnovers. We saw Toffoli try to step up in the middle of the neutral zone and just get absolutely raked over by Makar, who then scores a highlight reel goal. And it's just stuff like that where the Jets just seem not only one step behind, but like three steps behind. They're out of sync. They're passing into Av skates, and it just feels like every decision that they make, whether it's the stars or the depth players, nothing just seems to be going well.
Yeah, and that is something I wanted to hit on a little bit as well. You mentioned they're not in sync. I'm using Marty St. Louis language because I listen to what he says all the time covering Montreal. But the Jets don't feel connected. They're from offense to defense, like through the middle of the ice, like the neutral zone. Even in the offensive zone, it seems like the only like open spots they have to make plays are all along the perimeter or in non-dangerous areas. And I don't know what the issue is in terms of like a singular issue, but it seems like the team is not playing connected hockey. Maybe they're a little bit too far from each other, trying to push things a little bit too much because Colorado stretches them out with that speed too much. But they don't seem like the team that I watched several times this year and was actually really impressed with.
Yeah, I think Winnipeg chases the plays so often that they're just out of gas. This is one of those teams where they have to shrink the rink to the offensive zone because if Colorado starts breaking out and getting those quick strides against the Jets team, we've got no chance. The faster Colorado stretches the play, the faster the game ends, and I think that's happened in a lot of the other games. Hellebuyck managed to keep it a little bit within reach this time, but once the Jets started taking penalties and getting themselves into trouble, Winnipeg just ran out of gas. They're not capable of keeping up with the speed. They're not built to play that way, and it doesn't let them roll all four lines. That's their ideal vision of hockey. You force those turnovers, you disrupt Colorado's breakouts, you stifle their transition, and the Jets have gotten completely run over instead. It's been tough to watch, but unfortunately, I can't say I'm surprised. I think I did have a fear that this would be a situation. I trust Bednar to make a lot more adjustments in game, and I think he's just got a better feel for how to utilize the best parts of his talent. I know it's a little bit unfair to say of Bones because he doesn't have McCarr or he doesn't have McKinnon, but he's still got a really strong roster, and like they should be playing a lot better than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, 100%. I don't want to get too bogged down in like the pile on, because anytime a team is like this, it is very easy to pile on and sometimes also necessary to be critical. But at the same time, I look back at Connor Hellebuyck, and I feel like for the first half of every game in this series, he's been really, really strong. And then things start to fall apart a little bit. Now, I don't know if that's just wave after wave of Avalanche offense, because that has been how this series has gone. The Jets have not held an advantage in terms of control of the puck or control of scoring chances. But I also looked quickly during the second intermission, because I was thinking, who outside of Hellebuyck in the NHL has played so many games over the last 3 seasons in goal? Because the trend is fewer games, and it's really just him and UC Saros, who is also having a bit of a tough time against the Vancouver Canucks in the first round. And I think Saros was really good last year in the playoffs, but he's been up and down. Hellebuyck has had really good playoffs, really poor playoffs, and right now watching Connor Hellebuyck, it kind of reminds me of prime Carey Price, where the Canadians were not a great team defensively, to say the least, and basically rode the Carey Price horse into the sunset of the regular season many, many times. And by the time the playoffs came around, he was either playing injured or completely exhausted. And then everyone focuses on the goalie and is saying, like, this guy's the reason we're losing because we usually depend on him to fix everything, and he's not fixing everything. And I'm watching Hellebuyck making saves and then clearing rebounds out of the crease because, like, his defensemen aren't there at time, dealing with Lehkonen and Nikushkin on his doorstep. And I feel bad for him. I don't think this is on Connor Hellebuyck.
Yeah, there's a couple of shots that I think he'd probably prefer not to have gone in, but a lot of the goals against have come on the PK, where the Jets basically are a welcome mat. I think the Chushkin having that easy tip right in front of Hellebuyck, where Makar just had an easy shooting lane, and you had 2 skaters high, and they didn't stop anything. They just kind of stood there. Winnipeg's PK has been a huge problem. It's one of the areas where they're weakest, and I think that's where the Avs have really punished the Jets repeatedly. Helly is great at even strength. In the PK, he's a little more pedestrian, and that's been kind of blown up massively. I think he'll probably be pissed a little bit about one of the early McKinnon goals that he gave up in a couple of games ago. He's going to hate the Manson breakaway, but I think at the end of the day, it really wouldn't make a difference who was in that.
Yeah.
Bressois, I've watched a lot, swimming in his crease when there's a lot of chaos down low, and the Jets are terrible with that. So like, I just can't picture anyone in net really making a difference. And I don't know that it's a fatigue thing with Helly. I think it's just structurally this is a terrible mismatch. And the Jets, all of their weaknesses are getting blown up, and Helly's still human. He's not going to be able to stop every single chance Colorado is racking up in these games.
That's a great point, Harrison, that this is a matchup that really doesn't highlight the Jets' strengths per se. And we're going to talk about that along with some of the decisions that have made it tougher, I think, for the Jets to compete in this series made by head coach Rick Bonis and the coaching staff in general. But first, we're going to tell you where you can find Game Over Ottawa next year. Game Over Ottawa is relaunching in October. So for all of your Ottawa Senators action, reaction, news, analysis, and fun, make sure that you click on the Game Over Network channel right now, open a new tab in this video, scroll past my ugly mug, and click on the Game Over Ottawa channel. Subscribe, and then hit that drop-down menu. Make sure you hit the alarm bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Sens fans, friends, and family to check out our awesome community, and make sure you smash the like button on this video right into oblivion. And I should say, for those who are fans of Game Over Ottawa, Maud and Charlie will both be live tonight covering Game Over Edmonton with Avery Lewis McDougall, who's coming back for us as well. Lots of fun on that one. But for right now, we're here with Harrison, and we're going to talk about Rick Bonis. And I think the biggest one, the elephant in the room, is Peretti. Right? How many times can you think of where a young player who, I know he only scored 19, but let's face it, he missed 11 games. He's a 20 goal scorer, a young 20 goal scorer who also is a plus playmaker. Just doesn't fit in a playoff lineup. It's wild to me, even having watched Dom Ducharme scratch Cole Caulfield a couple of years ago in the playoffs. Even having watched that, seeing what's going on with Cole Perfetti right now, all I can think is like every other team that needs some offense and is looking for like young offensive forwards has got to be licking their chops at the trade opportunity here, because I can't imagine how he feels, not only to not get a shot, but then to be passed over when there is an opportunity to get into the lineup.
Yeah, I think the relationship between Perfetti, it was already strained early this year. He and his agent kind of said, I'm not happy with my role. He was getting like third line minutes. And I think coming into the season, he was communicated to pretty clearly that he'd have an important role to play with this team. And it's now gotten to the point where he's getting benched for Axel Janssen-Fjallby, which, no disrespect to Janssen-Fjallby, he's a fun player. But I think you're talking about a guy who's scored almost 40 points playing like third and fourth line minutes.
Yep.
There's not one other team in the playoffs doing that. No one is doing that. Um, there's been some decisions that are almost indefensible, but I would say that probably sits up there as one of the worst I've ever seen from a Jets coaching staff. It's not like you're scratching somebody who's got like 10 or 12 points. We're talking, like middle six production that you trade for. So for the life of me, I've struggled to understand it. I don't get if it's a stylistic thing that Bones hates. I don't know if there's been some disagreements behind the scenes, but what I am concerned about is once that contract extension starts coming up, it's not going to be a good time for the Jets.
Yeah, it's tough. The only thing that the only time that I can think of a player as good as Perfetti being scratched this long was like Thomas Tatar, first with the Golden Knights and then with the Canadians a couple years later, which both times were really tough to understand because Thomas Tatar's a very good player, especially like he's fallen off a bit now as he's aged, but in those 2 years, like he was very, very good. And I guess they just decided he wasn't made for the playoffs. I don't know, but not even giving Perfetti a chance to prove that he's not built for the playoffs doesn't make much sense. I don't understand it. I feel like it's one of those things with old school coaches that find a guy that they don't think deserves a chance or whatever, like usually a young player that they can kind of bully. And it just seems like, why are you kicking yourself in the foot, stopping yourself from being the best team that you possibly can be? And coming into this game, dropping Ehlers down to the third line, I was like, I don't know if I like that, because Ehlers consistently gets underutilized on this team. It's been years now. But like, if they had dropped Appleton down to the fourth, and I'm not saying Appleton's been bad, because I actually think he's been one of the guys who's played pretty well in this series, but then bring Perfetti in there with Lowry and Ehlers, I understand it a bit more. But if you're not going to do that, and you think that your third line is just going to be out there to check McKinnon, like I don't get it, Harrison. It's a tough one.
This series has kind of shown where Bones just doesn't have a great in-game feel for like adjustments and stuff. He'll have line combinations and some ideas that sometimes work. And I think like overall, team defensive structure, pretty good. Or at least during the regular season. I can't say during this playoffs run that it's been good. It's been the exact opposite of good, but generally speaking, high level, philosophically, I think Rick understood how this team was built. I think that they got some guys who kind of fit that mold, and I think it's been a disaster when matched up against like a team like Colorado, and where the Abs, I think, always seem to be on the lookout for changes to make. Bednar sometimes has rushed decisions, but generally speaking, like he has a good pull and he has a good feel for what adjustments make the most sense. Nichushkin goes on the first line. Middlestat handles the second line matchups perfectly, and you just have a recipe for where the Jets really have no answer. And so I know Ehlers has been pretty bad this series, but he's one of the few guys that you're going to have to lean on either way, whether he's doing well or poorly. There's not many other sources of high-end talent and skill on this team, and the Jets just don't seem to want to make adjustments to the top line in a way that I think makes sense. They had the best first line this franchise has ever had with Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde playing together, and ever since then, we have not seen that because Kyle Connor came back, and I don't know if it's Shifley who's driving that one or if it's someone else, but apparently you're not allowed to split Connor and Shifley ever. So we're stuck. I think the Jets are very much funneled down a couple of role archetypes. I think that they've got some like very old school ideas, and like we knew this coming in. Stars fans told us, they warned us. Um, but I mean, considering the alternatives, I guess it's not ended as badly as it could have. But I think in a playoff series like this, it's definitely been a huge tactical mismatch.
Yeah, and what do you make of the refusal to bring in like a guy like Colin Miller on D, where it seems like the defense have been like you look at the comparison of how the Colorado Avalanche react as a unit when they get the puck in their own defensive zone, when they can create a turnover, versus the Jets when they acquire the puck in their own zone. And it seems like the Avalanche, as soon as they get it, it's like they have a plan. They're moving it out with speed. They're moving up the ice extremely quickly. Players are in the right spots to provide outlets for whoever is the puck carrier. And the Jets, it's like just flick it up the wall, hope that it sneaks by a guy, and then hope that somebody's like cheating to the outside to create a break. And there's been so many defensive zone turnovers. It just like Nate Schmidt has looked great. You know, he has his foibles, especially in the defensive zone, but for what he does well, which is skate the puck and create some plays, move the puck up the ice, adding him in has been really effective in that area. I'm surprised we haven't seen Miller.
I don't know what Logan Stanley has on the coaching staff. I don't know if there's like some perhaps incriminating evidence or something. I think because he's big and tall and physical, that's why people imagine him to be a stronger defender than he is. Honestly, if Logan Stanley had been raised as like an attacking minded blue liner, I think his career would have been totally different. And you see flashes of that. Miller, I know, hasn't exactly been like a standout for the Jets in some areas in like the 5 games that he's played, but he's been decent enough. I mean, like the alternative is you watch Pionk and Stanley fire the puck into Avs heads, and it ends up in the back of your net within 2 or 3 shifts. So, I mean, really, it's hard to understand. I mean, we traded for this guy, and I mean, it was a low round pick, and I know he's a depth defender, and this is something that he's used to. But like, I watched this blue line and their inability to move the puck efficiently, and I'm like, he's a clear upgrade.
Yeah.
If Heinola hadn't gotten injured, he would have made the lineup. And so I can't understand why a guy who's got a similar sort of puck moving ability and also is kind of a cannon shooter from the back end, which apparently the Jets love. I don't understand why they don't use him. I mean, it just makes sense because this team, as is, it's not getting the job done.
Yeah, and the lack of adjustments at this point now, you're putting all these players that you could put in the lineup in a completely unfair situation, right? Because if you do decide to put Miller in the lineup or Peretti or both, you're like, okay, guys, fix this ship. We're facing elimination. Pressure's on. Show that I was wrong to keep you out, right? And it's just such a high pressure situation for a player to come into in a team sport where there's so many other factors beyond what you can control. It's the kind of old school coach thing that like really grinds my gears to see that kind of stuff happen. And Stanley in particular, one thing that just blows my mind with him is how often he gets beat on board battles. He's so stationary in the defensive zone. Like he'll move behind the net and to the front of the net, but in terms of like moving his body to block off space, very, very poor at it. And when he eventually gets beat, like one of the reasons why the Jets have been on the penalty kill so much is that arm comes out every time and he's tugging on jerseys. And like, he got the 2 back-to-back calls today. I'm surprised he didn't get more because he was getting turnstiled and hanging on to guys constantly. And I know he got the 3rd assist on the Schmidt goal tonight, but it was a really rough game for Logan Stanley, a really rough series for Logan Stanley.
It's been a really rough month or two, honestly. He had a stretch where he looked okay with Sandberg, and it was mostly because Sandberg is Sandberg. He's got a pretty good ability to make use of most defenders, and the more Stanley deferred to Sandberg, the better it was. Because the problem with Logan is that because he doesn't have those tight turns and agility. Excuse me, my dogs are barking apparently.
No worries.
Because he doesn't really have like the tight turning ability and stuff in corners and against teams like Colorado that pass really quickly and stuff. I think a lot of times he freezes in place. He's just there to block shots, and that's not really what the Jets need. They need guys who can force turnovers, who can make those clearances, start those breakouts. And he'll have some times where he makes some good breakout passes. And if he's skating through the neutral zone, he actually does well with that. But that's not where the Jets are spending most of their time these days. And I think it's become a huge liability because and I'm piling a little bit on Stanley here, but he's not the only defender struggling mightily. I think DeMillo's foot speed has been a problem.
Oh,
He's desperately trying to bail himself out on every shift, which is not really the position that you want to be in. And then you've got Pionk doing something out there. Neal tries really hard. He works really hard, but he is firing the puck wildly, and it is ending up in Colorado hands more often than not. So you just have a blue line that's a terrible, terrible fit for this series.
yeah, and especially when you've got a blue line on the other side that has Cale Makar playing like 28, 30 minutes a night. And Devon Taves has been excellent as well. Josh Morrissey has so much to try to do in this series just to try to move the needle from the back end. All right, we're going to talk solutions coming up next. And if you're sticking around with us, we're going to have a last segment where you can ask questions of myself or Harrison. Or whatever. You can ask questions about life, the Jets, hockey, playoffs, whatever, and we'll stick around for a few minutes to answer them. But first, I'm going to tell you where to find Game Over Montreal next year, which is my show. Game Over Montreal is relaunching in October. For all your Montreal Canadiens news, analysis, and fun, make sure you subscribe to our Montreal-specific YouTube channel. Open the Game Over Network YouTube page in a new tab from this video right now, scroll past my ugly mug, and click on the Game Over Montreal channel in our featured channel section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit the drop-down menu and get notified when we post videos or go live. Tell all your Habs fan friends and family to check it out and join our awesome community, and make sure you smash the like button on this video right into oblivion. All right, we're back with Harrison Lee from Locked On Jets, which you can find on YouTube. There's a link in the description of this video to go over there and smash the subscribe button, as you should, to get Harrison's fantastic analysis of these Winnipeg Jets, your Winnipeg Jets. So the good news is the series isn't over. Even if it feels like it is, because it really kind of does, it's not. Until that fourth game is won, things can change. There can be solutions to at least get the Jets to a point where the chance Hellebuyck gives them to steal the game, they can take advantage of and score a few goals, maybe build a lead. One thing that I've looked at, because we talked a lot about team speed tonight, Harrison. I say tonight, it's not even 6 o'clock. I'm not used to these afternoon games. We talked a lot about team speed. One thing that I've noticed is that Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan, two players who are very talented, good players, two big pickups for the Jets this year to build towards, a Stanley Cup run. This is the worst matchup probably for the two of them because they're both slow. I think Toffoli they both have very fast brains, but not very fast feet. And playing against the Colorado Avalanche, that's tough because they've got fast brains and fast feet. I wonder if you mentioned the hesitance to break up Scheifele and Connor. If I'm the coach going into game 5, I think I break up both of the top lines. I disconnect Monahan and Toffoli. I know that they played together in junior, and I know that they had some good runs at the end of the season there for the Jets, but put somebody faster on that line with Monahan in the center position, put Toffoli up with Mark Scheifele, which Toffoli's more of a playmaker. You can get Mark Scheifele more into the middle, focus on his shooting that way. Do you think things like that, maybe putting Peretti in the lineup as well, could get the Jets back into this series? Or are you on too little too late?
I'm of two minds of this. I think the 3-1 series deficit is probably a little too much to overcome. But I do think, at least for game 5, um, I'd like to see one combo that worked really well briefly in the couple of shifts it had. Connor, Monahan, and Perfetti were great together. They really balanced out a lot of their strengths and weaknesses well, and I think that could kind of mitigate some of the issues that we've seen with Monahan's foot speed. Because, like you said, his brain works fast, but it takes him a minute to get there. Toffoli, I don't even know what to do with him. He's just been a lot worse than I expected.
Yeah.
He had a really good regular season run, and then these playoffs, he just looks overmatched. I mean, like I know Monahan's not fast, but like I watched Toffoli and he's maybe like the fifth skater in the offensive zone when everyone else has already made their entry and stuff. So um, with him, I mean, you could probably put him on like the third line. At this point, I don't really know how else you get him going because it's clear that he's good at doing those quick short passes and stuff, and that's how he builds his transition game. But with the Jets
Mhm.
not really doing that, he's not really been a particularly noticeable factor. So unless the Jets change how they actually use him, you might have to find a way to shelter him. I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like he's definitely been one of those guys that I've circled on the list of players who, honestly, if he got scratched, I don't know if there'd be that much of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've been putting it kindly. Like, I'm a huge Tyler Toffoli guy. I really respect his game. I honestly think last year he was so good. He could have been in like the Hart Trophy conversation. He was like everything for the Calgary Flames before he was traded. But he's been invisible in this series. He hasn't shown up. He hasn't been making the smart Tyler Toffoli plays that I look for because he's always been a below average skater, but he made up for it with his brain and anticipating plays. And I don't know if he's just a bad fit with the way that the Jets are playing or if he's just not in it right now. Like, sometimes it's hard to get into that headspace, but it's been rough. It's been really rough. Other than just lineup, changes, obviously there's some tactical adjustments that the Jets could make. I feel like the biggest one is probably not come out and hit everything that moves for the first minute and then sit back and get trounced for the next 10, because it seems like every game that I've watched in this series has been they come out flying and then all of a sudden Colorado has 10 straight shots. So what would you say are like the big tactical adjustments that the Jets need to make in this series?
The one big one is just pressure. Winnipeg gives too much time and space and respect to the Avs, and that's kind of what they've taken advantage of. I know the Jets don't want to get called for interference, but the refs have put their whistles away when it comes to that. So you know what? If the Avs are going to throw two-man picks like it's basketball, do the same thing. Get in their face, slow them down at the neutral zone and at your own blue line, force them to dump and chase. When they do that, it takes away so much of what makes them dangerous. You're always going to have shifts where McKinnon does McKinnon stuff. I mean, it's just inevitable. But if you can limit the amount of times and opportunities that he gets, and also limit the depth lines, because those Avs bottom sixers have been running over us the whole game, that will go a long way to making the matchup a little more even. The Jets are one of those teams where, as long as they deny those zone entries, they can usually manage Colorado's speed a little bit better than they have been recently. But I don't know. I don't know why they have suddenly backed off and dropped so much deeper. And when there's not a lot of defensive support from the forwards and from the blue liners, you get these big gaps. And the Avs have been getting in right up the middle behind Jets defenders, and it's been a little embarrassing. I mean, this is not the kind of hockey the Jets were playing earlier this year, and it really shouldn't be happening now, but it is. So we'll see if Bones kind of asks them to be a little more aggressive against puck carriers and, kind of sealing off those spaces with guys who don't have the puck. I mean, don't go crazy and get yourself in the penalty box, but be a little more upfront. I think there's a big thing between being, physical and being smart physically. And I think that's where the Jets have kind of gotten themselves in trouble because half of them are just going for hits and sort of missing the broader picture of where that puck is going after the hit.
Yeah. And I honestly, I think one thing that I would like to see from the Jets going back home for game 5, I would like to see them be mad. I want to see them play mad because at the end of the game there, and I'm not trying to insult the Colorado Avalanche, they're a Stanley Cup champion for a reason, but when the net was empty and McKinnon had a shot, and then he goes back to try to get Nikushkin the hat trick, and Nikushkin ended up getting it later on in the shift. But I think when you're in a playoff game and you're trying to set up a guy for a hat trick instead of like hammering the dagger home, you're not taking your opponent super seriously. And like, I guess you could say based on how the last 3 games have gone, the Avalanche have every right to not take the Jets seriously. But if I'm the Jets, that would drive me nuts. Like, I'd be so mad that this team that we're facing off in a best of 7 series that is not over has the gall to play around when the net's empty like it's a regular season game. I would like to see the Jets come out with fire and brimstone in the next one.
Yeah, for all of the stuff about them being pissed off about being called frauds, I really feel like they've not shaken that label. I mean, if anything, they've gone above and beyond to prove whichever mysterious player it was, Pierre Dubois, um, they've definitely proven said player correct. And I don't know, like Bones didn't really seem to have that much of a reaction. I didn't get a chance to see his post game, but like his emotional state was very even during the game. Honestly, while I'm not always a fan of like coaches chewing people out, this is one of those games where he should be chewing them out. If I was
Yeah.
a coach on the bench, I would kind of humiliate them a little bit publicly because I feel like that's going to give them some pushback. That's going to make them angry. It's going to get them riled up, and I think they all know. I mean, none of them are under any illusions about which way the series has gone, but
Yeah.
they have to have some kind of feeling about this other than we're getting our teeth kicked in because everyone knows they are. And I think it's not really been a lack of effort. It's definitely the tactical approach that's killed them this series, but at the same time, if you're struggling there, then try and will your way through. I guess the skill hasn't been enough. Somehow, Hellebuyck is doing all he can to stand on his head. Morrissey's been transcendent, and you still look like the rest of the team is uh, playing Vegas hockey, which means you've had a few before you hit the rink.
Yeah, it is tough. All right, stick around because in a minute we're going to take your questions. If you got any, we'll stick around for a few of them at the very least. So ask Harris and I some good questions. And in the meantime, we'll tell you once again where you can find Game Over Winnipeg next season when we have actual Winnipeg people hosting the show and not some scrub from Montreal. Game Over Winnipeg is broadcasting from the Game Over Network channel for right now during the playoffs. However, in October, the network relaunches for real, and Game Over Winnipeg gets its own channel. So for all of your Winnipeg Jets content, fun, news, and analysis, head on over to the Game Over Winnipeg channel from the Game Over Network channel. Open it in a new tab right now, scroll past my ugly mug, all the way down, and click on the Winnipeg channel from our featured channel section. Click subscribe and make sure you hit that reminder bell so that you get notified whenever we post a video or go live. Tell all your Jets fan friends and family to come check out our awesome community. We promise they won't regret it. And make sure on this video you smash that like button right into oblivion. All right, folks, we're back with Harrison Lee. All right, Trevor Mon says, Scheifele in the postgamer said, Avs have made adjustments and we haven't. Wonder if Scheifele is comfortable with his adjustments to his line.
That has been one of the bigger topics of late. We talked about Ehlers, Scheifele, and Velarde being a real big thing. I honestly, it's only hearsay with what Mark has suggested in the past, but one thing he said was that it's hard to play with Ehlers because he's unpredictable. And I sat there and I thought, well, that's true. You've also outscored opponents like 21-7 when he's with you, and it seems like you guys have pretty good chemistry. I feel like this is one of the few times in a sport where I've heard unpredictability be a negative. Usually, when you're talking about somebody, a pro athlete, deception, skill, the ability to be unpredictable and spontaneous is a good thing. Now, sometimes Ehlers has brain farts and he passes to an opponent in a really dangerous spot. So I get it, right? But of the players that I think have the spatial awareness, the presence of mind, the timing, Scheifele is kind of one of the few guys that I trust almost implicitly to play with Ehlers and do well. And it seems like Ehlers has found him with really dangerous chances. So at some point, I feel like you got to suck up your pride a little bit and just say, you know what, we're doing pretty well together. It helps the team. We got to just run with it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you don't want to disregard what somebody who's actually playing the game is saying, but I've found in listening to different NHLers talk about, like who they like playing with or who's hard to play against, they don't really have a great grasp of the results of a certain matchup or a certain group together. What they have is just a feeling like maybe what it is for Scheifele is when he's playing with Ehlers, he has to work a little harder. He has to do different things that maybe he doesn't like doing, but because Ehlers is forcing him to do those things, they're creating better chances. They're giving up fewer chances. It reminds me of when the Canadians traded for Shea Weber back in the day. Jonathan Taves had a quote. It was like, "Oh, Shea Weber's like the hardest player to play against in the league." And I went and looked at like head to head, what did Taves and Weber, who were in the same division for like Taves' whole career at that point, what was the matchup like? Was it really tough? Like, did Weber dominate Taves? And it was like, no, it was like 77% of the goals were in Taves' favor. And it's like, yeah, Weber will hit you, but is it actually that tough to play against if you're outscoring them significantly? And maybe that's what's going on with Mark Scheifele. I mean, other than that, who's been the guy that, outside of the ones that we've talked about already, I guess, that you've been most surprised with the lack of offense so far for the Jets?
Uh, Gosh. If I have to pick one, and this is not really fair because I mean, the series has kind of been that sort of direction. But I guess Niederreiter, I was hoping would maybe finish a few more opportunities. He hasn't really had many chances, so I can't really pin it on him. But I've already spent a lot of time talking about the suckage of the top six. So sorry, Nino, you're going to be the guy that I have to find a way to single out here. But yeah, I think that third line in general, and it's not just a Niederreiter thing, it's just the third line in general, for as much as they spend time in the offensive zone, their finishing rate has always been an issue. They can grind out those possessions. They do great defensive work. At times they've been able to slow McKinnon down a bit, but like they just don't score enough for what the ice time amounts to. And I think that's something that if you were to move Toffoli there, maybe it would help a bit. I don't know. At this point, I'm kind of grasping at straws because it seems like the Jets in general don't really know themselves. But yeah, I guess Niederreiter would love to see him have a big game. He's had games where he'll score two or two goals, maybe an assist or two, and he's like a central part of the depth scoring. But that has definitely not been the case this time.
Yeah, it hasn't been great. All right, the Jets are down 3-1 in this series. Goals overall have been 64.7% in the Avalanche favor. Expected goals 63.6%. High danger chances are even worse at 67%. No, sorry, that's the wrong thing. I read the wrong thing. 60.58%, sorry, for the Avalanche. It's been a really rough series for the Jets overall, but they have time to try to at least salvage some pride here, turn the series around. We'll be with you for game 5. Thank you so much to Harrison for joining me here today. Harrison, before we close out, do you have anything that you want to plug? Aside from Locked On Jets, of course.
Oh yeah, you can just follow me on my personal Twitter account at HLLivingLoco. I have my stream of consciousness Jets thoughts, which are usually pretty fatalistic these days. But you know what? Maybe you get a good kick out of some of the Jets meme content. So check us out there. But yeah, hopefully we see a better performance in Game 5.
Absolutely. All right. Smash the like button on this video. Hit subscribe on the Game Over Network. Subscribe to Game Over Winnipeg, of course. And we will see you next time on Game Over Winnipeg.